Matilda's unhappy home life. The Wormwood family, a household of disdain, Matilda's home life was a far cry from the warmth and nurturing environment that a child deserves. The Wormwood family, consisting of Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood and their son Michael, was a picture of neglect and cruelty. They lived in a small, run-down house on the outskirts of a quiet town, where the atmosphere was thick with disdain and apathy. Mr. Wormwood, a used car salesman, was a self-centered and dishonest individual who spent most of his time scheming ways to swindle his customers. He had no qualms about lying, cheating, or stealing to get ahead, and his lack of empathy extended to his own family. He was dismissive of Matilda's exceptional abilities, calling her a freak and a nuisance whenever she attempted to engage him in conversation. Mrs. Wormwood, a vain and idle woman, was more concerned with her appearance and social status than with the well-being of her children. She spent her days lounging on the couch, watching television, and indulging in gossip magazines. Matilda's attempts to connect with her mother were met with disinterest and annoyance, as Mrs. Wormwood saw her daughter as a mere nuisance, a constant reminder of her own failed aspirations. Michael, Matilda's older brother, was a cruel and selfish bully who delighted in tormenting his sister. He took great pleasure in snatching her toys, pulling her hair, and ridiculing her intelligence. Matilda's cries for help were met with indifference by her parents, who saw her struggles as a normal part of sibling rivalry. In this toxic environment, Matilda was forced to rely on her own resourcefulness and wit to survive. She spent most of her days lost in books, escaping the harsh realities of her unhappy home life. But despite the Wormwoods' neglect and cruelty, Matilda's resilience and determination would ultimately prove to be the keys to her liberation. Key takeaways: Matilda's home life was marred by neglect and cruelty, with her parents and brother showing little concern for her well-being or happiness. This toxic environment forced Matilda to rely on her own resilience and resourcefulness, setting the stage for her eventual triumph over her unhappy circumstances. The discovery of Matilda's gift. The spark of discovery. Matilda's life was ordinary until it wasn't. She was an average 11-year-old girl with average grades and average friends. But on a typical Wednesday afternoon, something unusual happened. Matilda was sitting in her math class, staring blankly at the chalkboard as Mrs. Johnson droned on about fractions. Her mind began to wander, as it often did, to more exciting things, like her upcoming birthday party. Suddenly, without warning, the chalk in Mrs. Johnson's hand shot out of her grasp and flew across the room, landing with a loud clatter on the floor. The room fell silent, with all eyes fixed on Matilda. At first, she thought someone had played a prank, but as she looked around, she realized that everyone was staring at her. It was then that she felt a strange, tingling sensation in her fingers, like a buzzing in her veins. Without thinking, Matilda raised her hand, and to her amazement, the chalk rose from the floor, hovering in mid-air. The classroom erupted into gasps and whispers, with some kids cheering and others looking on in fear. In that instant, Matilda discovered her gift, telekinesis, the ability to move objects with her mind. It was a power she had no idea she possessed, and yet it felt strangely natural. As she focused on the chalk, she realized that she could control its movement, making it dance in the air with a mere thought. The incident left Matilda both thrilled and terrified. She wasn't sure what was happening to her or how to control her newfound abilities. But one thing was certain: her life would never be ordinary again. And key takeaways: Matilda discovers her telekinetic powers in a surprising and unexpected way. She is unsure of how to control her abilities, but is eager to explore and learn more. This newfound power has the potential to change Matilda's life in dramatic and unpredictable ways. Meeting Miss Honey. The sun was shining brightly as Matilda walked into her new classroom, her nervousness evident in the way she fidgeted with her backpack straps. She had heard whispers about her new teacher, Miss Honey, being kind and gentle, but Matilda wasn't so sure. She had been let down by teachers before. As she scanned the room, her eyes landed on a petite woman with a warm smile and sparkling eyes. Miss Honey was arranging books on a shelf, her movements fluid and deliberate. Matilda felt a sense of calm wash over her as Miss Honey looked up and caught her gaze. "Welcome, Matilda," Miss Honey exclaimed, her voice like honey as her name suggested. "I'm so glad you're here. Come, let me show you to your seat." As Matilda followed Miss Honey to her desk, she couldn't help but notice the way the teacher's eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. It was a smile that put Matilda at ease, making her feel like she was home. During the first lesson, Miss Honey introduced herself and explained the curriculum for the year. Matilda was fascinated by the way Miss Honey made learning seem like an adventure rather than a chore. As the lesson progressed, Matilda found herself participating eagerly, answering questions and asking her own. It wasn't until the end of the lesson, when Miss Honey handed out a math worksheet, that Matilda's exceptional abilities became apparent. She zipped through the problems with ease, finishing in half the time it took the other students. Miss Honey's eyes widened in surprise as she reviewed Matilda's work, a look of wonder on her face. "Well, well, well," Miss Honey said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It seems we have a mathematical wizard in our midst, Matilda." In that moment, Matilda knew she had found a teacher who truly saw her, who recognized her potential and would nurture it. She felt a sense of belonging, of being understood, that she had never experienced before. Summering, Matilda meets her kind and caring teacher, Miss Honey, who recognizes her exceptional mathematical abilities and makes her feel seen and valued. For the first time, Matilda feels like she's found a teacher who truly understands her. The evil Miss Trunchbull. The reign of terror begins. Miss Trunchbull was a force to be reckoned with. Her very presence sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest students at Cruncham Hall Primary School. She stood tall, her imposing figure casting a long, ominous shadow across the school grounds. Her face was a map of cruel intent, with a sharp jawline, piercing eyes, and a scowl that could curdle milk at 100 paces. The newly enrolled Matilda soon discovered that Miss Trunchbull was not just a figure of authority, but a ruthless enforcer of her own twisted rules. As she delighted in terrorizing the students, taking particular pleasure in humiliating and belittling them in front of their peers. Her weapon of choice was the dreaded chokey, a cramped, narrow cupboard reserved for those who dared to disobey her. One of Miss Trunchbull's favorite pastimes was test her students, pitting them against each other in absurd and humiliating challenges. She would summon a trembling student to her office, her eyes glinting with malice, and demand they perform some cruel task, such as consuming an entire plate of spoiled food or singing a ridiculous song in front of the entire school. Behind her imposing demeanor, Miss Trunchbull was a coward, using her power to mask her own deep-seated insecurities. Her cruel tactics were a desperate attempt to assert control over a world she felt was rapidly slipping from her grasp. As Matilda soon realized, the only way to survive under Miss Trunchbull's reign of terror was to develop a keen understanding of her tactics and find ways to subtly defy her. In summary, Miss Trunchbull was a master manipulator, ruling Cruncham Hall with an iron fist and crushing the spirits of her students. But, as Matilda would soon discover, there were ways to outsmart this evil headmistress and fight back against her cruel reign. Matilda's revenge. Matilda's plan unfolds. As the days went by, Matilda's determination to exact revenge on her cruel family and the evil Miss Trunchbull only grew stronger. She spent every spare moment honing her powers, perfecting her telekinetic abilities, and exploring the full extent of her mental strength. She knew that if she was going to get her revenge, She needed to be meticulous in her planning and execution. First, Matilda turned her attention to her family. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood, were oblivious to her newfound abilities, and she intended to keep it that way. She began by making small changes to her daily routine, subtly manipulating her parents' actions to achieve the desired outcome. If, for instance, she would make her mother forget to buy her favorite snacks, forcing her to settle for something healthier instead. Or, she would make her father misplace important documents, causing him to waste hours searching for them. These small changes went unnoticed by her parents, but Matilda knew they were just the beginning. She was building up to something much bigger, something that would make them realize just how wrong they had been to neglect and belittle her for so long. Meanwhile, Matilda's thoughts turned to Miss Trunchbull, the monstrous headmistress of Cruncham Hall Primary School. And Matilda had a special hatred for Miss Trunchbull, who had made her life a living hell with her cruel punishments and belittling remarks. Matilda's plan for Miss Trunchbull was much more sinister, involving a carefully crafted trap that would leave her humiliated and powerless. Matilda's revenge was unfolding slowly but surely, and she was savoring every moment of it. She knew that her family and Miss Trunchbull were in for a rude awakening, and she couldn't wait to see the looks on their faces when they realized they had underestimated her all along. In summary, Matilda's plan for revenge was taking shape, with her family and Miss Trunchbull firmly in her sights. With her telekinetic powers growing stronger by the day, Matilda was poised to take matters into her own hands and teach her tormentors a lesson they would never forget. Miss Honey's Secret. Miss Honey's Secret. The sun was setting over Cruncham Hall Primary School, casting a warm orange glow over the deserted playground. Matilda was sitting in Miss Honey's cozy little cottage, surrounded by the gentle hum of bees and the sweet scent of honey. Her teacher's usually radiant face was clouded with a mix of sadness and fear as she began to unfold the secrets of her past. A long time ago, I was a student at this very school. Miss Honey started, her voice trembling. I was a shy and timid girl, always trying to escape the wrath of the Trunchbulls. Matilda's eyes widened as she realized the connection between her beloved teacher and the notorious headmistress. I was an orphan, living with my cruel and abusive aunt, Mrs. Trunchbull. Miss Honey continued, her eyes brimming with tears. Ooh. She was a master of manipulation, using her power and intimidation to control those around her. I was terrified of her, Matilda. As Miss Honey spoke, Matilda could feel the weight of her teacher's words. She imagined the timid, young Miss Honey, cowering under the Trunchbull's reign of terror. It was hard to believe that this gentle, kind-hearted woman had once been at the mercy of the monstrous headmistress. But I survived, Matilda, Miss Honey said, a hint of determination in her voice. I worked hard, I studied, and I escaped. I vowed to never let anyone bully or intimidate me again. As the darkness gathered outside, Matilda felt a sense of awe and admiration for her teacher. She realized that Miss Honey's story was not just a tragic past, but a testament to her strength and resilience. In that moment, Matilda knew that she would do everything in her power to help Miss Honey reclaim what was rightfully hers. The summary in this chapter, Matilda uncovers the shocking connection between Miss Honey and Miss Trunchbull, revealing a dark and tragic past. Miss Honey's story is a powerful testament to her strength and resilience, and Matilda is inspired to help her teacher reclaim what was lost. The final confrontation. The morning of reckoning, the sun was slowly rising over Cruncham Hall Primary School, casting a pale light over the deserted playground. Matilda and Miss Honey stood nervously outside the entrance, their eyes fixed on the heavy wooden doors that led to the headmistress's office. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for, the moment that would finally bring an end to Miss Trunchbull's reign of terror. As they stood there, Miss Honey grasped Matilda's hand, her eyes shining with determination. "Remember, Matilda, you have the power. You have the gift. Use it wisely." Matilda nodded, feeling a surge of confidence flow through her veins. And she had been practicing her telekinetic abilities tirelessly, and she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The door of doom, with a deep breath, Matilda pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the only sound the ominous ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Miss Trunchbull sat behind her desk, her massive frame looming like a dark cloud. Her beady eyes narrowed as she saw the two girls, her face twisting into a snarl. "So, you think you can take me down, do you?" she sneered. Matilda stood tall, her eyes locked on Miss Trunchbull's. "We're not here to fight you, Miss Trunchbull," she said calmly. "We're here to stop you." With a flick of her wrist, the telekinetic energy began to build, swirling around her like a vortex of power. Miss Honey stepped forward, her voice firm. "You've terrorized these children for far too long. It's time to face the consequences." Summary: in this tense and pivotal moment, Matilda and Miss Honey confront the formidable Miss Trunchbull, determined to put an end to her cruel reign. With Matilda's telekinetic powers at the ready, they face off against the headmistress, refusing to back down. The stage is set for a battle of wills, with the fate of Cruncham Hall Primary School hanging in the balance. Will Matilda and Miss Honey emerge victorious, or will Miss Trunchbull's tyranny continue unchecked? A new beginning. Matilda's life with Miss Honey. Matilda's life took a dramatic turn for the better when she moved in with her kind-hearted and gentle teacher, Miss Honey. For the first time in her young life, she felt a sense of belonging and happiness. The warmth and love she received from Miss Honey created a safe and nurturing environment that allowed her to thrive. Miss Honey's cottage was a beautiful, cozy little house on the outskirts of the village. The cottage was surrounded by a lush garden, filled with vibrant flowers and buzzing bees. The atmosphere inside the cottage was serene, with soft music playing in the background and the delicious aroma of freshly baked cookies wafting from the kitchen. Matilda felt as though she had entered a fairy tale when she first stepped into the cottage. It was a place where she could let her guard down and be herself, without fear of being belittled or punished. At a new routine, Matilda quickly settled into a new routine with Miss Honey. She would wake up early every morning to help with the household chores and prepare breakfast together. They would spend their evenings reading, playing games, or practicing Matilda's telekinetic skills. Miss Honey encouraged Matilda to explore her love for learning, and they spent hours discussing books, mathematics, and science. Matilda felt like she was finally living the life she was meant to, surrounded by love, care, and understanding. As a summary, moving in with Miss Honey marked a new beginning for Matilda. She finally felt loved, cared for, and accepted. The warmth and kindness of Miss Honey's cottage provided a sense of security and belonging that Matilda had never experienced before. With her new guardian's support and encouragement, Matilda was able to blossom into a confident and happy child. Matilda's bright future. A bright tomorrow unfolds as Matilda stepped out of the mysterious and often tumultuous world she had known. She gazed out at the horizon, her heart brimming with an unbridled sense of possibility. The shackles of her oppressive past had been cast aside, and in their place, a radiant future beckoned. The once maligned girl, who had weathered the storms of cruelty and neglect, now stood poised on the cusp of a new chapter, ready to unfurl her wings and take flight. The journey that had brought her to this threshold was marked by trials and tribulations, but it was also punctuated by moments of resilience, courage, and growth. Matilda's innate brilliance, once stifled by the doubts and fears of those around her, had been fanned into a blaze of confidence and self-assurance. She had discovered the transformative power of education, and with it, the realization that her thoughts, ideas, and dreams mattered. As she looked out at the world, Matilda saw a tapestry woven from the threads of possibility and promise. She envisioned a future where she would use her gifts to uplift and inspire others, to create ripples of kindness and compassion that would spread far and wide. The bright lights of her future shone like a beacon, guiding her toward a path of purpose and fulfillment. In this radiant new dawn, Matilda's heart swelled with gratitude for the people who had stood by her, for the lessons she had learned, and for the unwavering belief she had in herself. As she took her first steps into the unknown, she knew that the future was hers to shape, hers to create, and hers to illuminate.